All right. So, welcome to episode 25 of the Rooster's Crow. I got one of very few returning guests with me, Mr. Vin Armani. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Did I get it right? I think I got your name
Yeah.
wrong last time, like a dummy. But yeah, thanks for coming on again. It's been months, probably six, still since March since we last spoke.
Mhm.
And I reached out to you because you've released a video recently that was kind of really timely, talking about build the ark, and it's a hashtag that you've been using on social media, right?
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
wanted to kind of get into that and kind of riff a little bit on what that means to you and talk through it a little bit. But before we get into that, how have things been the last 6 or so months for you?
Wow. I mean, they've been super eventful here. It's been kind of a wild ride the last 6 months. Well, I mean, I have been accepted into the church now. My spiritual father came and baptized me and chrismated me here, and
Congrats, man.
that's
Awesome.
yeah. Thank you. It was a pretty big moment for me, and then there's been a series of things that have happened since then. I've detailed some of them in other conversations that I've had, but needless to say, it's been right on time, and it's been profound, the experiences that have happened. And I think just like everybody else, and as we were talking about before this, we're in some, I mean, I think everybody can tell what momentous times we're in. This is
Hmm.
not just a normal period that we're going through. Something really big that, if history remains in the way that history has remained, right? So there's nothing to say that we're not also in a period where history goes away, where it's
Hmm.
wiped out, right? We're
Yeah.
actually seeing the capability of things, of archives of things to be able to be wiped out. A lot of information is centralized. So if history remains, historians will look back on this period as a pivotal period in the evolution of humanity. And I think that we can all tell that something is happening. I can certainly tell that something is happening, but
Hmm.
something's happening in my life. And like you said, it's like it's very fractal, that
Hmm.
in the same way that all of these things are changing for us collectively, there's so many things that are changing for each of us individually. And
Yeah,
so,
Vin, you froze up on me a bit.
oh,
Yeah,
sorry about
yeah,
that.
yep,
And
yep.
so that's been, I mean, it's been informing me as much as as much as I think it's informed everyone.
Hmm.
And that's, so that's been the nature of sort of what's been going on with me.
Yeah. How's it been? Kind of where you're located with the sickness that's been going around. Has that proliferated a bit in your area, or has it stayed kind of away?
Well, I mean, the so-called physical virus has never been here, so we've never had it in
Hmm.
this place. The psychological and spiritual virus has permeated because, well, that travels through the phone in your hand, right?
Hmm.
So that's you can't quarantine. We haven't quarantined that off. We've quarantined any physical viruses, so everybody's got to go through a quarantine when they land here, and that's continued.
Hmm.
But it is an interesting microcosm, and it's been very informative, I think, for myself and the people who are here. It's been informative because there are people walking around here with masks.
Hmm.
Seriously, there are people walking around here with masks. Now, I've been
Hmm.
here since April 2020. There's been zero COVID, like no deaths, no hospitalizations. Like they would occasionally be like, oh, we had a pot like 6 months ago, maybe every 6 months, there's like a positive test. And they're like, oh, three people tested positive. They developed no symptoms. They're
Hmm.
not hospitalized. They put them in a quarantine, whatever. And then it's gone, which tells me it's probably a false positive on the test.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, which you're going to have. And so, but yet you still have people with masks on, but you have this weird situation where there are still, from a year ago, tattered signs on the doors of certain stores that's like no mask, no entry.
Hmm.
But you walk in there without a mask, nobody cares,
Hmm.
nobody says anything. It's no big deal. Nobody cares. And when everybody's out in public on the beach or with family members or in private gatherings or whatever, nobody wears masks. There's never been a lockdown. There's never been a mask mandate. But yet the weirdest thing is that even in stores that have now taken down the signs, right, where it's like no mask sign, they've just taken it down. You walk in, there are still people who they've become so accustomed, they just put on their mask. So it's almost like they don't know when to stop. And that's been so informative to me that I'm like, whoa, if in a place where there's been no COVID, no deaths, is also there's like, I mean, I'm just going to be crude here. There's like basically no white Westerners here. Okay. Who, I mean, if anybody's going to talk about like who is spreading the virus, right? What is the demographic of the individuals who are spreading the virus the most? You look on the TV, who are the people putting down the mandates, all of these things, they're white Westerners, Europeans, Americans, whatever. That's 2% of the population here. You almost never see them. Right. And so even culturally, it's different. So it's like, whoa, wow. With none of that, never had a mask mandate, never had a lockdown, never had any COVID, never had any deaths, never had any hospitalizations, never had anybody with symptoms, had all of this, and there's still people wearing masks. And you think in the places that have had some of those things that it's ever going away? That's why I say we're in a whole new world, man. Whole new world.
Hey, you froze up again. There you go.
I'm back.
Yep, there you go. So like, yeah, it's interesting. It seems like that is more ubiquitous and more impactful is the mind virus that is that is crazy. Like, it's an aerosolized virus. There's no evidence that these face cloth coverings work, and it doesn't matter. You could show people data, you could show people studies by New England Journal of Medicine that they don't work. They're actually,
well, bro, what I'm saying is it doesn't matter in a place where provably where every government official is coming out and where just like there's no deaths, where every government official is like, there are no cases, and they've got a running ticker of how long it's been for community spread, that there's been any community spread, where every single person to come onto this island is quarantined for 5 days. And where it's like, dude, there's no COVID on this island. You forget about a study, right? It's like, it doesn't exist. You're wearing a mask for something that doesn't exist, right? So it's like, this is why I've been telling people for so long that it's like, stop with the charts and graphs. Stop with the studies. Stop with all of that, because I'm telling you right now, like if you came here, you would see that it's like, oh, it's way deeper than that. It's like an alternate reality, which tells you that this is a completely spiritual phenomenon. It's a spiritual and psychological phenomenon, completely, 100%. And so we need to stop dealing with it as anything but that.
Why did this? How is it that this is happening now with this virus? How come there's this reaction at this time and place? It's so strange. Why is that?
Well, I don't think it is strange. We are 13 years into, but really, I would say we're a decade. We're a decade into the smartphone plus social media age. And I've been writing a lot and talking a lot, and maybe I'll do a video, but like this idea that Marshall McLuhan promoted, saying the medium is the message, right? Some people maybe have heard this idea of like the medium is the message. So what the medium is the message means, and he was specifically talking about television. So he was in the generation that was the flip from radio to television, but he was born even, I think, as radio was being introduced. And so what he was trying to communicate was that it's like, it's not the content on the television that actually matters. It's the way that the television itself and how you consume television alters your existence, alters the nature of the family, and really it's about an alteration of attention, right? And that even in your home, and it's interesting because for many years I didn't have a television. And even the layout of my home, my family, we don't watch very much television, and we haven't had cable or any of these things, right? So the nature of it is that, think about, you set up a room, and you set up a room that it's like everybody focused at a thing, this thing here. If you don't have a television, you never set up a room that way. Like when I didn't have a television, I didn't have a room that was like focused on something. Now I happen to have a room that's like that, but that's where my prayer corner is, right? The rooms that I have icons in are set up in that way, right? That they're focused with the attention on it. And so that even is an indication and symbolic of something, because then it's like, ooh, so what we were doing was our prayer corner. That was our prayer corner, right?
Yeah.
The medium is the message. But at least in that situation, and you look, then the news. And so from that was born, I would say the height of that was 9/11. Or maybe even the height of that was Donald Trump, right? Because he's a product of cable news.
Yeah, he's the culmination.
He's the culmination of everything.
Yeah.
Right. Both for his detractors and his supporters. And of course, he was a reality TV star. And were he not so popular on The Apprentice, which was predictive programming, you know, you look at the media stills for The Apprentice. What is it? It's him sitting at a desk. Right. All leader, like boom, there it is. And the stark contrast. And it's like, oh, well, that's predictive programming for him behind in the Oval Office sitting at a desk.
Yeah. You know who produced that show too, right?
Who produced it?
Jeff Zucker.
Oh, well, there you go. That says it all.
So he was president of ABC, and he produced The Apprentice, and now he's president of CNN and produced the Donald Trump presidency.
Well, this is something that a lot of people don't know. So I was on reality TV. People do know that, right? I was a reality TV star for 6 seasons. But one of the things that I learned is that the pipeline is basically between broadcast news and reality TV. Almost all of the producers on our show got their start in broadcast news. And it really goes to, if it bleeds, it leads, because what it's about is choosing shots, choosing, right? You film a lot, but then you pick and choose, and that's how you tell the story. That's how you edit the narrative. It's an editor's art form. Reality TV is an editor's art form more than anything, more than like a cinematographer or a director. So what do we have now? The medium is the message. We've moved from TV and we've moved to social media, which is like constant. Everybody's in like constant. It's not just you show up and it's the 5 o'clock news, or even cable news went to 24 hours, and we see how that changed everything. So what we're seeing is the result of not only the passive intaking of this information, but then the mob, the crowd, you know, and what emerges from out of the crowd. The problem with that is that at least Jeff Zucker has an idea of the story he's trying to tell. When it's just the crowd, what you get is the entity that is at the core, the spiritual pattern that is at the core of the crowd. So if the crowd is, you imagine that everybody on there is a devout Christian, right? What does that look like? Well, it's just like, it's going to manifest Christianity, right? Everybody's a Muslim. It's going to manifest Islam. Everybody's a woke. It's going to manifest the prince of this world in the church of woke. And so that's basically what we're seeing is this is now the medium is the message that we get to, instead of just being about ratings, what am I watching? What does the Nielsen box say that is the most popular thing? Now it's like, I literally get to participate in amplification. And what I choose to amplify is a reflection of what is already inside me in terms of my value hierarchy. What I amplify to the positive, and what also I amplify to the because it still is amplification. If I'm like against it, reacting against it, that also says something, right? What you react to also says a lot about you, what you react negatively to, as much as what you react positively to, or maybe more.
Yeah. You get, you know, if you're in the dialectic, you know, you're trapped, you know, against it or for it. Hold on, let me get, my dog is going nuts here. Hold on. All right. So I had to take a little quick break to kind of, you know, get some technical difficulties out of the way. But I like where the conversation was going. Maybe we can kind of reframe it here. You were mentioning, you're talking how, you know, Marshall McLuhan talking about the medium as the message, how the television, not only the particular piece of content is less important in the way that we have televisions in our rooms, completely reorient the way that we have relationships with each others in terms of family, and kind of reorients and restructures our consciousness. And I think he was so prescient in that. And I think we can step that up a notch when we talk about, you know, our phones, you know, and social media. I was having a conversation with a buddy the other day, and we're talking about how they're going to, you know, they're going to make these jabbies kind of like a subscription service. So your immune system is going to be like a subscription service where you're going to have an update. Like your phone gets an update. It's like, here's a software update. You better update, or your phone, you're done. Like, it's like you have till tonight to update. And it's like, you can do it while you're sleeping. Don't worry. It'll reorient itself. So it's like, we become what we behold, right? So we're literally becoming our phones, where we're needing to be updated and reconfigured every once in a while to exist and live in society. It's nuts.
I think that's a really good point. None of this could happen if that metaphor was not present. So you couldn't even introduce an idea of, you know, like, okay, you need one woke poke. Okay, no, you actually need two spaced apart. Okay, no, now you're actually, come to find out, you actually need three. And I've started to see people now who are a little more on the materialistic side, who are like, wait a minute. This means that it's going to be an endless number. And it's like, yeah, yeah, that's how it works. And anybody who had thought about this would say, well, no, it's definitely going to be an endless number, because the incentives here are all about, well, you look at the flu shot, right? Imagine if they could have just mandated the flu shot, that you couldn't, if they could have found some way, the pharmaceutical industry could have found some way that, well, every year you have to have a flu shot, otherwise you can't go to school, otherwise you can't be hired at a job, otherwise you can't go into a store and shop. Of course, the pharmaceutical company has every incentive to do that. And then you look at, well, who are the major advertisers on cable news? You know, there's a pharmaceutical ad every other ad on cable news. And so you say, well, why are the pharmaceutical companies buying all of these ads? And then, well, why might all of these cable news outlets and establishment media outlets be running stories and running narratives that would promote the interests of their biggest advertisers?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's also Boeing ads. There's Boeing ads. Well, when was the last time you were in the market, Fox News viewer, for a 737, right? Like, that's not the reason why Boeing is paying them advertising dollars. It's not because they want to run a 30-second spot. It's because they want to run the rest of it.
Yeah. Maybe if you're in Afghanistan, you'd be in a market for something like that recently, you know?
and it really comes down to the metaphors that people have. You know, sort of a traditionalist, the Taliban, you want to talk to them about updates to their society. It's like, no, there are no, what do you mean updates to society? There's Sharia law, there's the Quran, there's hadiths, there's no more hadiths, bro.
Yeah.
All the companions are gone. There's not, we can only say whether or not this hadith is like valid and accurate or invalid, but there's no, you're not going to introduce one. Nobody's just going to find one.
We tried for 20 years with all the resources you could think of. Hey, you froze up again a little.
And you can't, and the thing is that you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do it. It's just the metaphor is not there within the culture. You have to introduce the metaphor first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is the materialist scientific, this is the milieu that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
The materialist scientific milieu
Yeah.
is you're going to have an update. There's going to be something new that's going to come along, and people want it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even that it's been forced. People wait in line for the new iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
camp outside for the new iPhone. You know, it's not even that people have to force it. And so those same people who have been now programmed to say, oh, new is better. A new update? Of course I want the new update.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the new update's good. Oh, it makes my immune system even better. Oh, okay, of course I want that.
Yeah.
So it's just the value hierarchy is there, as opposed to, no, the value is in never changing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have something that works. The only thing we can do is muck it up. If we
Mm-hmm.
change it, the only thing we can do is muck it up. And that's basically where we're at right now. That's the two sides, is like innovation versus tradition
Mm-hmm.
are banging heads against each other. But we've reached the end of innovation because innovation has clearly become corrupt.
So
Right?
as it tends to be. So the tradition is still there. The eternal truths are continuously there, underlying, the structure of reality. But what happens for how does this become corrupt? Right? Is it something in innovation itself that becomes corrupt? Because innovation, in a sense, can be a bulwark against the corruption, right? But then it becomes corrupt in itself. So how do you do? What do you do when the structure itself, right? Corruption starts building on it, and then the left, or the left's job is to identify the corruption, identify the sickness in the hierarchy, right? So then it can kind of reset to a more traditional, stable, eternal way of being. We've seemed to get stuck in the making the changes, and now it just iterates, this iteration process of progress that is understood to be good in itself. But that's not the case.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
That's the issue. The issue is that the value hierarchy has been flipped. So nature's hierarchy is nature, while there is innovation in nature, it's almost always fatal.
Mm-hmm.
So innovation would be mutation.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, of course, if there's no mutation, there's no evolution. If there's no mutation, there's no adaptation. So species will just die out when the environment changes. There's change. Change is a constant. There is change. And so change needs to occur. But nature is vehemently against changing something that works. Mother Nature is conservative, they say, right? So it's the reason why, as human beings, if we're going to go off like an evolutionary model, there'll be something like a vestigial structure where they'll be like, why do we have this? Well, sometime in our evolutionary past, it was necessary, but it's like, it's still around. Why do we have a tailbone? Right? Why do we have this little piece of like tail that sticks off? And it's like, well, in the past, when we weren't bipedal, there was some need for a tail, right? Like our more ape-like ancestors or whatever. Mm-hmm. Nature doesn't like that. Nature is overall conservative, even though there's change. And so in a traditional society, that's basically how innovation is looked at. Mm-hmm. And what it demands is actually something really, really good, is that those people who do naturally feel driven to innovate, to do something new, they do it in many societies, they do it at penalty of death. So, a Galileo or something like this, that it isn't just that everybody's looking around for like, what's the new thing? They're looking around for somebody doing something new so that they could like kill that individual. Mm-hmm. So that means that in order to introduce a new idea, you really have to believe in it. And you really have to be wed to this idea, to this concept, to this new behavior, whatever the heck it is. That's flipped on its head now, right? And so because of that, the culture is embracing mutations for the sake of mutation.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of what happens if an organism starts doing that. If all the cells in an organism are just like, oh, mutation? Yeah, let's go towards mutation. Everything mutate. And that's what TikTok is basically like, the social media of mutation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like what it's all about is how can I be even more mutant than the last thing? How can I invent a gender or a sexuality and give it a name that's like only applies to one person and is so obscure and all of this? That's where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's pushed up, I mean, it's the nurses, the TikTok nurses dancing was like, really, it set it off.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, whoa, this is about as far from what would traditionally be appropriate for medical professionals to be doing in the middle of a pandemic. Like this is a super mutation away from what we're supposed to consider about these individuals who are like, they're supposed to be about rigor and seriousness, that it's life and death.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are doing dancing videos on TikTok. This is like, we've gone into the absurd.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is that now tradition, by those individuals, tradition is seen as the negative.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we must mutate. But if it's always mutation, you're guaranteed death.
Yeah.
That's the path to death.
I think people intuitively know that. So they're seeing this chaos. It's a kind of controlled chaos, but in the midst of all this chaos, they, this displaced anxiety becomes really hyper accentuated, and people will latch on to anything, no matter how absurd it is, to get them out of this place of uncertainty. So that's where this narrative comes in about, the kind of cathedral, science, capital S, Dr. Fauci, and they feed these absurd lines and they put in these measures, which are obviously destructive, but people will fight tooth and nail for them because it's some sense of certainty. It's some sense of a narrative that I can get behind. And if you're not behind it, you're the one who's crazy. You're the one who's not letting things get back to normal. So, and it's understandable why someone, would latch on to something, because things have been so chaotic and made chaotic. So it's you talked about kind of this is the manifestation of the flood in our world, right? We just have this kind of hyper chaos that's happening at all levels, this kind of complete uncertainty and ambiguity at all levels. And it's happening before our eyes, and you've been talking about it for a while, and we've talked about it, when we talked last. And it's interesting that it's something that we've always thought, we see in movies, or that we've talked about as, young with your buddies, is actually happening in front of our eyes now. And, and it's not clear of how much is actually happening and how much is being, portrayed to us as a type of controlled chaos. So there can be a solution that comes in, the great reset in a sense. So one example is the supply chain. Like anything that you order now, right, is on back order, whether it's, I was trying to get stickers for my son's, football helmet, just trying to get some clothes, trying to get some cleats for him. And everything's on back order. It's like, is that is the supply chain really that, that derelict right now? I don't feel like it is. I feel like it's, and what we look on the TV and what we see in the media is kind of, more stronger hurricanes and tornadoes. You're seeing worse catastrophes everywhere. And it's like, is that actually happening? Or are things being accentuated to continue to push this chaos in our consciousness so we can continue to hold on to whatever they kind of give us there? I'm not sure. Even that's unsure.
Well, I think that there is a spiritual question there, really, because I am remiss to say that this is organized. Like, I believe that it's organized because it's clearly it's a pattern, right? That we're having there's a global phenomenon happening. So clearly there's a pattern at work. So it has a structure to it in terms of what it's doing, and it's doing things on multiple dimensions, right? So it's got a structure to it. I think though that saying that there's some cabal of human beings that is planning this is, I think, wrong. I don't think that that's an accurate representation of what's going on. Is there a cabal of human beings who are leveraging it and taking advantage of it because they saw that, because they understand how the energy moves? And so they're basically like, if they can exacerbate it, they're exacerbating it. They're who are moving it in this way. I would say yes. And the reason that I would say yes to that is because, like, that's what all people who are of faith do, right? So if you're a person of faith and you see something happening within your community that matches up to your principles, that aligns with your principles, you not only support it, but you might get in front of it. Hey, what do you need? Hey, let me amplify this. Let me shout it from the rooftops. Let me do all of this. And so are there individuals who would be benefited by the supply chain going down? Yes, absolutely. Like, are there individuals, which is one of the things that people sort of, you say, is it happening or is it being like planned? And the thing is, there's no difference. Or is it just being presented to us as happening? And if the last year and a half has taught us anything, it should teach us that there's not really a difference between those. Like, there's not really a functional difference. There's not really a functional difference between, is there really a physical virus, or does everybody just believe there is a physical virus? Like, in the way that plays out in the world, there's not a functional difference. Right? It doesn't matter. And so it's the same thing with climate change, that it's like, whether or not the weather is actually changing, the things that the climate change cult wants people to do is not dependent upon whether the climate is actually changing. It's only dependent upon whether particular people in particular places of power believe that the climate is changing in the way that these people say, and for the reasons these people say, because they've got the solutions that they're selling.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like the infomercial that's trying to sell you knives, right? And it starts out with the black and white, and it's like, don't you hate it when you're trying to cut knives? And look, it's a blunt. It's always blunt. Here's this. So first they're presenting, you've got a problem. Mm-hmm. And it may even be a problem you were like, I was unaware that I had this problem. And they're like, no, you have a problem. Well, if on the other end of that is, I've got the solution, you should probably start to be like, this problem thing, let's talk about it a little bit, right? So you go to somebody like our friend who's offering us the Fauci bargain right now, and you're like, bro, do you have a history of trying to get vaccines, to try to get some pokes mandated for the last 30 years? Has that been your big message? Yeah. Well, this is convenient. Right? Yeah. So maybe should I question, does this just so happen to fall in line with what you want? And so then that's the spiritual question. So the spiritual question is, okay, well then what's organizing it at the level above? Right? Where are the desires coming from? Because we don't supply our own desires. Right? You don't bring some guy out of some tribal Maasai who's living out in the bush and just raising cows, and you bring him and you're like, dude, brand new iPhone. He's like, yeah. So why is my wife crazy about the brand new iPhone? It's not because there's anything objectively wonderful about the brand new iPhone. It's because all the people that she sees around want the iPhone. So if she's got the iPhone, then this is what it is. This is how we get our desires. And so then you have to say, well, where's that starting point? Because it's obviously deep and powerful. Where did these deep desires come from that all of these people vehemently have them. Like, where are they coming from? And that's when you start getting into powers and principalities. Because the desires of the people right now, the desires of what I'm calling the Church of Woke, objectively is about death. Like, objectively, it's a mutation that is just, it's set up to basically eliminate humankind.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to set up to be injecting the globe every 8 months with experimental things, you want to, like, you're going to wipe humanity off the face of the planet. If you're going to do this every 6 months, 8 months, you're planning to basically, we're not that smart. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of project that you don't undertake. You don't undertake it unless you really want, because something is going to go wrong. Okay. Like, something is going to go wrong. Yeah. And it's like, nope. We've got FDA approval of something, when it's like, all these doctors are like, the clinical trials are not done. How is this even possible? Oh, well, but you've opened Pandora's box. Because now it means, oh, there are no more clinical trials for FDA approval. Like, as much as we got this time, next time, expect a lot less. And then next time, expect a lot less. And then next time, we'll just trust the pharmaceutical companies to do it.
Do you think Dr. Fauci, do you think you think he's acting in good faith, but he's ideologically captured?
Oh, that's a very good question. And that's a hard one. That's a hard one, right? I believe that he's acting in, it's so difficult. It's so difficult with someone like that, you know, because the thing that I see with this guy is, like, he's just the personality of someone who has been waiting so long, who believes that he is so important and has the answers and is the savior, and has been waiting so long and is finally getting it, and is getting the accolades from the establishment that he always wanted. And you see it. Like, you just see that this guy is just you see that he's just a sad individual. He probably got bullied when he's tiny, you know? He probably got bullied when he was a kid, you know, all of these things. And he figured, well, I'll become this head and do this. And, oh, I'm hanging out with Bill Gates and I'm doing all of this. Why is nobody? I know it. We should, and it starts, you know, small. If only people would just listen to me, you know? If only we could just get these vaccines, I know that I'm right. If only we could do these type of tests, if only we could do this, I just know we could eliminate all disease and we could do all of this. If only people would just listen to me. And that is the fertile ground of the enemy.
100%. Yeah.
You know, that's his archetype is he's Ephialtes from like 300, that story of King Leonidas, you know, the sort of deformed guy who's like, I want to fight with you. And he's like, you can't. And he goes to Xerxes and he tells him, oh, there's a goat path. You can get behind him and kill these Spartans. That's a real archetype.
Yeah.
You know, who on earth knew about what is it? The Center for Allergies and it literally is the center for like the National Center for Allergies. Okay. And he's the director of that. It's like, okay, you're the director of a federal agency, but it's like, wait, the director of the federal agency of what? Of allergies.
Yeah.
And people start laughing. You imagine all his life, all his professional life. It's like, of course this guy is who he is. Of course this guy wants to force everybody. Oh yeah, we're going to force kids. Yeah. Yes, I support every kid in order to go to school, every child, even though it's not affecting children.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's there's this mass hysteria that's behind it, that, I'm on a local Facebook page for our coronavirus, this area that I live in. And people are just rabidly hoping that we get these vaccines for 2-year-olds and up as soon as possible. Please, for God's sake, please. And it's like, these aren't bad people. That's the worst part. If there was these like evil people, like, yeah, let's get these kids. They're like moms. Most of them, 90% are middle-aged white women who are, the whole devouring mother archetype is just unleashed on the world. And it's like, wow, there's no retorting them. There's no like arguing or giving good points. There's nothing you can do in that sense. So it's like, wow, what are they doing? Like, even all the intentions are good, you really want to mass vaccinate the entire population, the military, the doctors, the nurses? What if there's an unknown you haven't considered in this new technology, this new platform?
Oh no, it's not if.
Yeah.
It's not if. It's guaranteed. That's the entire reason why you do clinical trials and you wait for them to be done. If the default wasn't unknown unknowns, there wouldn't be an entire protocol for doing the testing of these before they're approved. It's not if.
Yeah.
Like, if there isn't, it's a miracle. If there isn't, it's a miracle. Right? Like, you have to default to there's something wrong with this thing that is fatally wrong. Because that's true of most drugs, most that are going to come out.
Yeah.
And I think like you bring up a good point about these mothers and the fact that they've come to this place. And this is why I am well convinced that what we're dealing with is something of like diabolical significance. That like what we're actually facing down, to be quite frank, like it's Satan. It's Satan. Like it's the kingdom of the Antichrist being brought. I'm just going to flat out say it. Like, that's what it is. And why do I say that? Okay. The reason why I say that is because what you're dealing with is pure evil. What you just said, right? Where you were like, this last 5 minutes is the manifestation of evil. Okay. What's evil? How do we define evil? Evil is not just like, so like if I walk into the savannah and here comes a lion and the lion attacks me and the lion like eats me, I'm not going to necessarily say that's evil. Okay. So even I might not say that some guy who's like going to stick up a convenience store with a gun, right? He's got a gun, whatever. He's going to go into the convenience store. He's going to stick them up. He's going to steal from them and go. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's using coercive violence. It's all of that. Am I going to say that he's evil? No, probably not. I'm not going to use the term evil, because what is evil? The definition of evil for me, as I understand it, and I think as we play it out, is when you use the virtue of an individual in order to hurt that individual. And so often when we're talking about, like in spiritual terms, the adversary, the enemy, Satan, the whole thing is Satan as the great deceiver. Or they will say like the snares of the adversary. In other words, like the trap of the adversary. And even when we go back to like the original encounter with the serpent, right? The original encounter with the serpent is what we see from Eve in Genesis chapter 3, is that it's like the serpent asked her this question. Well, did God tell you that you couldn't, eat this? And she's like, yeah, he said we couldn't eat it and we couldn't touch it. There's a lot of things in that question, because like Yahweh didn't actually say that to her. He said it to Adam, like in the story. And then clearly Adam said it to her, because there was nothing about you can't touch it. It was just you can't eat it. So the snake knows at that point. And then he's like, no. You won't die. Like, you're not going to die right now. Like, no, your eyes will be open. You'll be like us. Right. And then it says from her that she's like, when she saw that it was good to eat and something to make one wise, then she did eat it and gave to the man to eat. So basically, when she saw that it was safe and effective, good to eat and something to make one wise. safe and effective,
Mhm.
right? But just because it's safe and effective at something, right? You don't know what's really going on. Like, you don't have the full picture. And so
Mhm.
what did the serpent do? He used her virtue,
Mhm.
right? Because it was like, wait, this is good to eat and it makes me wise. Oh, I should be eating this, and I want to give this to the man. Like, that's a
Mhm.
good thing. That's her virtue to do that, right? And so it's like, that's what's happening. That these women are like, they're being good mothers. Their virtue is, I want my child to be safe. And not just my child, but I want everyone to be safe,
Mhm.
right? I want this to end. I want my child to be able to experience a world without this, terrible disease and all of this. And so it's being taken advantage of. It's being taken advantage of. They're being told, oh, yeah. If you do this, then it will end. But it's a lie. If it's 2 weeks to slow the spread, then this will end. Lie. If it's another mask mandate, everybody wears their masks, then it will stop the spread. Lie. If
Mhm.
you take this, if you take this vaccine, it will stop the spread. Lie. If you take another one, this is also a lie. If you give it to children, this is also a lie. It's all a lie, but it's all being, the only way that this is able to take place is because it's taking advantage of the virtue of people.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. And like, when I say it's a lie, like, this is demonstrable that things were, so maybe the people who are even saying it don't know that it's a lie. Right. But the only way that they're able to, let's just say it's failed. It's turned out to not be the case. Right. Even
Yeah.
if we don't want to say lie, but it's like, the only reason they've been able to do any of these things is because everybody's acting out of virtue.
Mhm. Virtue signaling. It's,
That's it.
it's most grotesque. Yeah. If they would have told, I don't even know this is the case. Like, if they would have told people, hey, you get this jab, right? And before they said, you're not going to spread it, right? You do it for the community.
They did
You
say
do it,
that.
you do
They
it
did
for
say that.
others. You do it for others, right? Now that's not the case. You can spread it equally,
Yep.
just as much as if you don't have it, right?
Yep.
Now, well, it lowers hospital severity
For
of
you,
illness. Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Right. If you're vaccinated, not for the person you spread it to. If you spread it to and again, we don't even know that this is true.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, these the numbers and the studies and all of this, because not everybody's getting tested. Like, we honestly don't know. It could very well be that unvaccinated people are mostly asymptomatic, and that actually, if you took the number of people who would test positive, as to, because they're like, oh, all the hospitalized, and it's like, yeah, but you know what, most unvaccinated people, why would you go and get tested? Like, I know a lot of people in the last month who are like, oh, I'm laid up in bed with the flu or whatever, and it's like, they're not going to get it tested for COVID. Maybe that's COVID. You know what I mean? Maybe they test positive. Who knows? Right. Yeah. And so it's just like, we don't, all of this is just, lies, damn lies, and statistics. The whole thing is not even about any of these numbers.
Yeah.
There's a deeper spiritual disease at work here. Right. There's a much deeper spiritual disease.
I think, just to speak to this conception of evil. So there's a philosopher from the 30s, 40s, 50s, Hannah Arendt. She wrote a book called The Banality of Evil, Eichmann in Jerusalem. And she did a deep study of the Nuremberg trials, and really got into the psyche of how could these people do such evil atrocities. And her insight was, evil is the most banal thing. When they're asking, well, why would you're setting up people to be, killed by the hundreds of thousands and whatnot. And the retort that you got from Eichmann was, I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job. Right. So the virtue of wanting to do a good job, right?
That's
wanting to do a good job. Yep. It's just being pounced upon to do the most grotesque and evil things. And people can't think that can happen here. It is happening now. It's not might happen. It is happening now. right?
Oh, it
So
always happens. It's
yeah.
a permanent. I think this is see, and this is the real problem with a loss of tradition,
Hmm.
because deeply embedded in tradition is the fact that this is a constant. That and the notion of the adversary, the enemy, Satan, the prince of this world, whatever, like especially for Christians and traditional Christians in particular, it is a constant
Hmm.
that demons and passions and the adversary is there all the time, trying to, and that you've got to stop and say, ooh, is this a virtue? Like that you've got to stop and be like, am I being used? Am
Hmm.
I being deceived right now? Like, wait a minute, I need to stop. But the fact that I think even more so in like our current environment, the lack of thinking about what is a virtue. Like I think that the moral and ethical hierarchy is more stratified within sort of the modern progressives than it is within, let's say, in terms of, I'm saying there's less introspection,
Hmm.
and it's more ossified. You can't get them to even think about it, right? I talk with even Orthodox priests
Hmm.
about moral issues. And I think that a lot of people, the sort of like the line on something like this would be that these guys would be like, no. And maybe some from Protestant priests, right, would be like, oh no, absolutely, I have the answer. That's wrong. That's not been my experience with Orthodox priests.
Hmm.
My experience with Orthodox priests has been them being like, yeah, that's complex.
Hmm.
Let's walk through this thing a little bit here. You know what I mean? And you get
Hmm.
into this big conversation about something. You're like, wait a minute, I thought that you were like ultra dogmatic. And
Hmm.
they're like, yeah. I am ultra dogmatic, but we have to get down a few layers, because it's like, you may think that you're fighting this passion, but then you've introduced this one, especially when it's something like pride,
Hmm.
right? You may think that, and you feel real good about like, yeah, I got past that. And it's like, but your pride,
Hmm.
but pride has got you. He got you over here. And so it's like, no. This is a chess game. This is jujitsu. This is spiritual jujitsu that you got to fight. It's not cut and dry. It's not so easy, and then you don't become a hypocrite, because, I mean, this is what's being thrown back in the faces of the wokes, that it's like, what happened to my body, my choice?
Hmm.
But that only applies in certain situations. And it's just like,
Yeah. There's
right?
there's no words you can say that
No.
that can pierce it, almost to nobody, almost to anybody, like that
Mm-hmm.
is has that mindset. And it's kind of bizarre. So I think the question is what is the solution? I think something that you've been speaking to is the ark, right? So what is an ark, right? We know about Noah's Ark. We know about the Ark of the Covenant. We
Mm-hmm.
can think Dante's Inferno as an arc, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
more of a
Sure.
kind of a story that leads a people, unites a people through a space and a time. The Theotokos is an arc, right?
100%.
Right.
The arc.
The
Yeah.
arc, right? And then what can a modern arc look like? And you've been talking about, build the arc, and I have a list of, maybe we could do this kind of a little bit rapid fire, or
Yeah.
take as much time as you want.
Let's
And
go.
I'll give you a couple words and you kind of just come see what comes to mind. So let's call this arc phenomenology, right?
Okay.
So what's the arc going to look like? And you've spoken about some of these things. So what's the arc going to look like in terms of systems of communication and commerce between people?
Well, I think that if we look around, so again, we need to not have innovation, needs to not be a part of this,
Mhm.
right? We need to be looking around, and we need to be looking for revelation, not innovation.
Mhm.
So what has been revealed? And certainly, I'm biased toward Bitcoin, but I teach a school, Bitcoin mystery school. So I teach this class that's about sort of what are the deeper concepts that are in there. And for me, it was very much delving into those concepts that really brought me to orthodoxy. If people know my story, and I write about it in my book, Render Unto Caesar, to see that like, oh, this is a revelation, and in many ways it is an arc. I think that what it ends up looking like is protocols, not platforms. Because if we look at what is it that the enemy wants, and where do we see the negativity? And again, the medium is the message. Everybody driven into these centralized, like their pens, right? And the algorithm is directing you. And with the algorithm directing you, there isn't a chance for emergence. There isn't a chance for revelation. So we have to have the space where the Holy Spirit is allowed in, right? What inspiration? Okay, the Spirit comes in. That's the word, inspiration. There's not space for inspiration when the algorithm is directing everything. You may think, oh, hey, I have now discovered this, and I now believe this, and I now understand this. And it's like, because you went down a rabbit hole. And then you say, well, who was directing the rabbit hole? Right? What was the consciousness directing the rabbit hole? And it's like, oh, there was a consciousness directing that rabbit hole. You were not in control of those decisions. You were given a very narrow set of options. And then you went, and this thing was learning about you. Its entire job, the algorithm's entire job, is to keep your attention. It's not to educate you. It's not for you to have right information. As a matter of fact, if you have wrong information and that keeps you on longer, it would rather give you wrong information. It would rather lie to you, which is how you get a phenomenon like Q. Right? Is that it's like, oh, well, this is very addictive. The nature of all the Q stuff. Oh, did something come out over here? Oh, what does this mean? Let's decode it. Let's spend all this time and attention on it. That is like informationally addicting. And that's what these algorithms are all about. And so we need a means of communicating with each other. We don't want to give up the ability to do what you and I are doing right here. But invariably, if these platforms are going to continue to be offered for free, which they are, and if we want to prevent ourselves, and those will be the most, obviously those will be the most popular. So a paid platform is never going to be able to compete with a free or freemium platform. It's just not going to happen. That you're going to pay up front, sight unseen. The platforms that get you to pay, it's because they like give you a little bit. It's like freemium. They give you a little bit, and then it's like, do you want to be able to have more than 45 minutes on Zoom? Do you want to be able to when you come out of the app on whatever the music app is, the streaming app, do you want it still to play on your phone? Or if you turn your phone to sleep, that's going to be $15 a month. And it's like the first time they get you on one album that you like, or one podcast, or one any of these things, they got you. You're done. You're paying, and you're paying forever, recurrent, right? Yeah. But something like Twitter and all of that, they're never going to be able to have that model. And so we don't want to give up our ability to communicate many to many people, it's seamlessly, but that needs to become platform based. That is the arc. This is why I keep saying, like, the arc is you. This is the model now. And I think that clearly that is, it seems to me that is the evolution of the pattern. Like, I feel like that is the pattern that Christ is pushing us towards. Like, this is everything that's in the Christian church, is that it's like, first you have the Theotokos, like this individual, right? And it's like, you're going to be the new ark, the flesh, right? Like this, we're going to move into the flesh now. The ark is going to be a flesh-based ark, right? It's going to manifest like in our bodies. She's the first one, right? She's the first one. And then the Holy Spirit and her together, right? There's Christ in the flesh, right? The Holy Spirit in the flesh. But then after the resurrection, the Holy Spirit is blown into the apostles. So it's like, now it's spread. And then through apostolic succession, it spreads. And through baptism, through the sacraments, that the Holy Spirit, I mean, we go and we participate in the divine mysteries. And it's like the Holy Spirit enters us, and we're supposed to do it on a regular basis. And we should. And I want to, you know what I mean? Like, that's like, as a Christian, it should be something that is like you're hungry for, is because you've had the experience, you know what that is. And so then it's like, okay, well, now you're the ark. Like that's it. That's it. You're the ark. So if you're the ark, why are you putting yourself on these platforms that are controlled? If you're the ark, why are you not allowing the Holy Spirit to direct you? Why is it the algorithm? Why are you actively allowing the algorithms to direct you? Yeah. Actively allowing it. Like you're giving yourself to it. And so it's like, we have the technologies to do all of the things that are being done on Twitter, Zoom, all of these, because they're using protocols that anybody could use. They've just taken it and made it easy. Right. And so building the ark is the work. And there's going to be, not everybody is technically savvy, but it's like, look, not everybody's going to be a priest. Not everybody's going to build a church. But those that have the drive to do that, and those that want to see humanity move forward, communication, payment systems, all of this has got to be moved. And it's, things that we work on here, things that I'm working on. So of course I'm biased for that particular thing. But what I would want people to know is that, like, all of the things that you can currently do, that can be moved all into your control. And we can all do this peer to peer. Right.
And it's
so
not going to be,
give people the knowledge.
It's not going to be a universal thing where it's, everybody's going to, latch onto this thing, right? It should be something where you have skin in the game, where you have a stake in the platform that you're participating in, right?
Yes.
And you're building this platform with other people that are participating, so you can communicate, communicate with the people that you want to communicate with. So that's exciting. That makes a lot of sense. Like you talk about, so there's the arc, right? And then fractally, there are the individual arcs.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
That's what the nodes are, right? To spin up a node, right, is to develop a point of the Holy Spirit to take root, right? And you have these points now that are global, right? It's not just local communities where you have these people that are, are inhabiting the Holy Spirit, or the Holy Spirit is inhabiting them. So they need to connect globally. And these systems that it's easy to connect on are going to become less and less hospitable to those people, right?
Yes.
So you need to build.
Already this is happening.
Yeah, definitely. You need to build, alternate systems of communication and commerce, right? So I think that's what interests me, is that you're kind of in doing the work of doing that, in a sense, right? So,
and look, I worry about, it's because of that I've sort of backfilled in a way into orthodoxy. It's a weird way to go, right? But it makes me feel even more confident that this is right, because it's in meditating on this concept that I think, in meditating and contemplating and building this concept, that I myself became aligned, or began to resonate with this pattern of the Holy Spirit. And it was in resonating with that and saying, like, what even is this, that orthodoxy itself like came to the forefront. And then for me, taking on that practice sort of magnified my understanding, if that makes sense. So it's like, it's sort of backfilling into something that's already resonant, to being like, where is this pattern, right? Like, who has talked about this pattern? Who is manifesting this pattern? Who is practicing this pattern? Because this isn't like, it can't be new, right? It's got to be a new manifestation of an ancient pattern. It must be that. And so then that's where it's like, oh, well, here's this practice that, there it is, right? So it's a very, I do worry, and I'm constantly like checking, like with priests that I have communication with my spiritual father, with my community, with my godfather, that it's like, constantly checking and being like, is this right? Talk to me about this. Like, I'm feeling this, but it does seem like this is the pattern. And so I feel very, very confident. And, like, I just pray on the things that are happening, but this is what keeps coming back for sure.
Do you have a lot of people that are, as technically savvy or that are kind of in the same mode that you're in, that are also Orthodox and across the globe that you connect with? Like, how does that look like? What does that look like?
I wish. And that's actually something that I've been working on. So with this school, with Bitcoin Mystery School, this was actually something that I received like one day in, like, right coming off the beach from my morning prayers. It was like, hey, you're going to do this school, you're going to do this thing, you're going to teach these classes, it's going to be like this. And I was like, what? Like, nobody's going to. But it's been pretty phenomenal that it's been overwhelmingly, and maybe it's just because of my message that's been out there and the audience of people that see me in public, but it's been overwhelmingly like people of faith, or at least people who are aligned with that. And so from there, from this one class, now the goal for me, as I've taken over like a suite of software, open source software, now the goal is to start sort of bringing people up to speed, both with the coding and with the sort of the Bitcoin and blockchain technology as well, so that there can be sort of a coterie of people to be able to work on this project, as opposed to what it's been for me in the blockchain space, is that, like, you sort of hope that some developer somewhere is interested in this technology and has the skills and is willing to put aside whatever it is that they're doing professionally and come on board. But in this case, it's more like, as with any organization that's going to be sustainable, you have to be able to train people from like novice to teacher, whether that's academia, whether you're talking about martial arts, whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking to anything, it doesn't matter, right? Like, there has to be some sort of, this is the apprentice system. Whether you're an electrician, a carpenter, a mason, whatever it is, somebody's going to come on and it's like, okay, do the basics here. Like, you're just going to be a gopher. You're going to be cleaning up, sweeping up, and then maybe you teach them one little thing or whatever. So I've tried to systematize it a little bit more, such that then it's like, okay, then if you get 20, 30, whatever people who have already self-selected themselves. So these are people who have already self-selected and are already aligned, and we start from square one with first principles of what this is about, then everybody's aligned, and then I think it can be really powerful. So that's like, this is my goal. I think this is a multi-generational thing. I mean, things are going to get real bad within this generation. Who knows how long it's going to be before, these solutions are really needed, but necessity is the mother of invention, right? So it's like, people will adopt these things as they become needed. And I just hope that we have enough time, and I think we do, for there to be at least a small group, even if there were 5 to 10 people. I've worked on open source software projects for many, many years. And, some of the biggest projects in the world that are used by millions of developers, or at least hundreds of thousands of developers and millions of end users, are maintained by, a dozen developers around the world, maybe not that many people. So it doesn't take many people to have a massive impact with these type of projects.
What would you say that are there prerequisite kind of competencies one would need, and what is the biggest challenge you've seen from getting someone to where they're at to being kind of optimized for the process?
Well, we haven't gotten someone from zero to optimized for the process yet, right? So the sort of continuing education portion of this, I just finished the first month of classes for that this month. And so then we have the second month coming up, and these are kind of the guinea pigs. But I already did have a series of coding classes that I taught for a little over a year, and a business code from Go that I started. And the problem there was, while I was teaching coding, it wasn't to like some greater project. So it's difficult in that case to sort of teach somebody. It's much easier when, it's much easier for me to teach you to be a carpenter if you like show up on the job right as we're about to start framing out this house. Like, by the end of the time that we're done framing the house, you will have gained the next step, right? And then we go to the next house, and now you already have that, and then you gain the next step. And 40 houses from now, you're a carpenter. you've got all the pieces and you can be left alone to do your thing. And that's how it's got to go. So it's sort of like, as opposed to a more academic way, I'm approaching this in a more like tradesman sort of way. And so everybody's using the same tool set. All of the software that I'm using, I've moved it all over to use the same tool set. So it's sort of like everybody keeps using this same, codex, you could say. Everybody's working out of the same book that they'll be working out of in the future. And then they're able to edit the book themselves and correct it and copy it and work on this thing. And so, the biggest challenge is just really a matter of will more than anything. And keeping people, I think the biggest challenge is honestly telling the story of why this is important. Because for somebody who believes that this is important, the getting to a place of technical proficiency as a coder and with this tech, it's not that hard. Especially because you're just doing it's the same basic functions over and over. Once you've got a mastery of a few things, you're good. You don't have to know everything about coding. You just have to know what works for this, right? It's just like writing a book. I don't need to know every single language in the world. I just need to know English, right? And it's like, I don't need to know how to write every single genre if I'm just writing a novel, right? And if I'm just writing a science fiction novel, I don't need to know how to write a World War II novel, right? A historical fiction novel. So it's just like, in this case, it's a very specific thing. You're going to learn those, and then, you can work on this project. And if you want to go out further, but the hardest thing, as is always the hardest thing, is where is the will, motivating people to spend their time and energy on it. And that's all about telling a story. And so the people who are involved at this point, they see what's happening around the world. They see they're affected by it. And now it's just a matter of how to communicate the story of like, well, if we do this, then we'll get to here. And I think that that's part of what Build the Ark is about, like having this spiritual understanding.
Yeah, very cool, man. Well, awesome, man. If we want to learn more, where can people find you? Are you having another class? You said, are you doing another introductory class, or are you moving along?
Oh, no. There's introductory classes every single month. So every month, bitcoinmysteryschool.com. They usually sell out pretty quickly. There's only 20 students per class every month. But people can, if they follow me on Twitter, it's at Cyprianus. So it's CYPRANOUS. And if they follow me there, then they'll see I promote it usually, and it'll be usually my pinned tweet when registration is open. So when it's open, then it's good. And anybody that's done the intro can then do the continuing education classes as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'll link to it. In the description of this video. Man, I got a lot that we could talk about, man. And I wish my kids just got home. My dog's going nuts, but dude,
all good.
There's a lot that we could kind of double click on here. I have a lot more stuff that I wanted to get your ideas on maybe for next time. The idea of Curtis Yarvin, neocameralism, your agorism, just your ideas on you talked about the Samizdat, which I found fascinating and very relevant to what we're talking about here. Hume's guillotine, repentance, truth, reciprocity, the Didache, like a lot of stuff these are stuff that popped out. And I think each one of these threads could be a couple hour conversations.
I think so. We'll have to do it. We'll have to do it again in the future.
Yeah. Sooner rather than later.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, well, awesome.
Great talking with you as always.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks. Appreciate you. Brother. This will be up soon.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great.
Take care.
See ya.
Yeah.